Terry.
Good afternoon, Melinda Terry, North Delta Water Agency and the California Central Valley Flood Control Association, which is cities, counties, and reclamation districts that have responsibility for maintaining levees and drainage and doing other flood control responsibilities. Our North Delta Water Agency is one of the agencies that is helping fund the work that Walter and some of the others are doing on the modeling. And so I do hope that you will invite him back to present now that they've kind of got the new modeling done, so that you can see. For us, obviously, the importance is we want to be able to trust the effects that are being told, and to the extent that there are problems with the model or the assumptions that were put in, that creates a problem because these effects could actually be worse or they could be better. And we're open to both, but we have to be able to trust it at the end of the day, which was why we were interested in funding to make sure the errors and problems that we were seeing with the model outputs. The perfect example is if, doing cold storage, the dead pool, 1 out of 10 years. As Walter said, that's not realistically how you would actually operate it. And so what you do is you make the model work how you really would operate, and then determine what are the impacts then from that project, the various conservation measures. On the summary, I on the one hand, like summaries myself, but I do want to caution, I'm a little bit like Bert. I'm a little bit concerned because in my reading of, I've read both drafts now, both of 2012 and 2013, most of the chapters. It really is the details is where you will find really more of the more important information about things that are really critical, I would assume, to science in particular, like the actual duration, the intensity. Those sort of things you can't really often get in a summary. And in addition, I think when you look at some of the conclusions already that are in it, a lot of them are not substantiated by data or any science reports or anything that they reference. So you really I encourage you to look at that. And then I also would encourage you to pay particular attention to the level of evaluation that they've done based on existing conditions and baselines, because if you'll start noticing a pattern where a lot has been just put off into the future, and frankly some of it during implementation. So for very major things like whether it's all the drainage systems, they don't really, or the water wells that they're going to make dry for homes or businesses, they don't know how many. But the same stuff exists on a lot of their science stuff, so they just haven't analyzed a lot. So again, those are the details that I hope you will really look for. And also, you can't see in a summary necessarily what they failed to analyze. And, and that's what I really noticed, particularly when you look at the effects analysis. And granted, it was done to really look at what's the effects on fish. But as a result, they're doing modeling, and so you do see a lot of changes in the water elevations, the hydrology of, where you're going to get more erosion and faster flows and what have you, and higher, lower elevations places. But those didn't get translated over into things like recreation, which will be significantly impacted by water elevations, navigation, as well as the marinas, as well as the fish and water quality. Now, the water quality did analyze it, I will say that. So I do encourage you to do that. Finally, there just really are, for the council, I guess I would say this is more than the science board. The other thing is that there are just so many, it's a cumulative impact, if you will, because if you looked at, for instance, agriculture, you can't really see, there's over 700, well, there's actually exactly 750 impacts in the EIR, EIS, and as I've said before, 48 of them are unavoidable, 46 of those are imposed on the Delta. But like if you looked at agriculture, you can't just read the agriculture chapter to read the impacts. You then also have to go and look at the land use chapter, the transportation chapter, the soils chapter, the geology chapter, the water supply, water quality. All of those have individual impacts to agriculture, so understand that they're not just all listed under the agriculture chapter, they're actually separated out. The same could be said for recreation, and of course for the council. Those are two of the primary economic drivers, and yet they are both the most heavily impacted. And we're talking, I had written up, and I guess maybe I'll just submit it in written comments because I don't want to take up your time, but you're talking in 3 different chapters where, because of the amount of noise, the ground vibration, which also affect the species, by the way, and the loss of water for both homes and businesses due to dewatering activities during a 9-year construction period, people are forced to abandon their homes. So, this delta as place, there's just, again, you have to look in all of these different chapters, and then as a council, I hope really figure out where do we balance this, because it's very clear in this document, for instance, that water quality, 7 of the 48 unavoidable impacts are for water quality constituents. So the in-delta water users have their water quality degraded, while at least for 2 of the constituents, they get a 46% improvement for export water. I just don't think that sounds co-equal. Same for water supply. The statute was very clear that the reliability is for California, which hopefully really includes the in-delta. So,
Ms. Terry, here's one thing I'd like you very much to do, and virtually none of the interest groups have done that. When you're asking us to make a review based on the statutory determination as to whether BDCP has met the requirements of law or not, would you please identify for us the sections that give us the statutory authority to consider and evaluate what you're recommending? Because the problem with this whole thing is you're raising a bunch of issues, some of which do not come before us. I mean, I don't think the modeling methodology is necessarily a violation of statute, particularly. I'm not asking you to do it now, but from this point on, we need the folks who say, well, you got to do it this way or that way, to give us in writing a legal explanation of our authority concurrently with asking us to do something. That's not a reference to the science board, of course, but it's only to the council because we have the focused statutory mandate.
Yeah, and I understand that, and as I recall, some of the lawsuits that were filed on the Delta Plan were based on you don't have the authority. So I understand that, but on the other hand, I would really ask you and the other council members, I guess, what was the point, or I guess, do you think it was the intent of the Delta Reform Act to sacrifice the Delta region in order to improve other areas? And that's the point.
Terry, all I'm saying is, in writing, your legal analysis of our authority to consider the arguments you're asking us to consider. That's all I'm asking. But in writing, because I want to make sure the organizations who are asking us to do it give us some basis. I may have my own theory about it, but I want your theory as well, legal theory.
Okay. At some point, I'd like to know if you think it was the intent to sacrifice the delta, because, again, let's look at what's co-equal, and that's, if co-equal is not what you're supposed to look at, maybe I misunderstood the purpose of the Delta Reform Act, but...
Co-equal, the sentence on the delta comes after the co-equal. They are co-equal goals, and then they said they are to be achieved in a way that's sensitive to the delta. That's the language of the statute. Now, if you wish us to read it that the impact on the delta is equally as important as water reliability and the delta ecosystem, then you have to give us the legal argument that is convincing on that.
Well, I guess I will, but I guess my point is the reliability does, first of all, apply to the in-delta,
and
too.
Since many of your clients are litigants in this issue, I don't think it's unfair to add, some of your delta clients are litigants against the Delta Plan, claiming we lack authority or we have not done it the way you wish us to do it. So just be specific on the legal arguments you're making to us, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
But again, I really hope that the council itself will look at some of these impacts because they are severe to the recreation, and I'll just preliminarily submit them because, again, I didn't want to read them today, but I hope you will take a look at them. And I only pulled these out of 2 chapters. So again, for all of these, you really need to look at multiple chapters because you won't just find the impacts in one chapter. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Terry. That was the last speaker. My suggestion on a recess, since we're running up against time constraints, is how about we take a break for 30 minutes, allowing people to pick up lunch and bring it back and work through lunch, the eating of the lunch, if that's okay with you. Ladies, will there be somebody in here to guard the computers and the material and all that as folks go out? Okay, let's do that. We stand in recess until 1:30. 1:30.